This is the Observations Podcast for Sunday, the, 2nd of June, isn't it? 2024. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dale Franks.
I'm Michael Wade.
And wow, we've got a lot to talk about, and I'm not entirely sure that we will cover more than a single subject. By the way, before we start, is it just me, or is the 1 minute to minute and 15 seconds to have to sit in utter silence watching the countdown timer go to zero?
That's always fun.
Is that one of the most just uncomfortable and cringy moments of doing the podcast? Nobody sees it, but we're both, I'm sure, both just sitting there looking at the countdown timer going, 1 minute, 59, 58, 50. But finally, the countdown is over, and we are live. So, Donald Trump was convicted in New York, I think to no one's great surprise, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I thought we'd do is, and this is, there are many times when you're on that I am extremely grateful that you're a lawyer, because there are things that you can explain that I only really have a theoretical knowledge of and no practical stuff in. So this is one of those times when I think I can sort of sit back and just let you run with most of this. But what I did want to do is just start from the beginning. Let's talk about what he was convicted of, and then we'll move on to another similar case, but we'll get to that. So here is the deal. New York Public Law, Section 175.10, falsifying business records in the first degree. If you falsify business records, it is a misdemeanor. However, if you falsify business records with the intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, falsifying business records in the first degree then becomes a Class E felony, which in New York State is the lowest tier of felony. So,
but it has a longer statute of limitations.
Right, because you couldn't get Trump under the falsifying business records in the second degree because it was a misdemeanor. It was out of the statute of limitations. So there has to be another crime that you're trying to cover up,
which is called a predicate crime.
Okay, so the predicate crime in this case is New York election law, section 17-152.
Well, it might be. We don't know.
Well, yeah, it might be. We're not entirely sure. But right. It's conspiracy to promote or prevent an election. Any two or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties thereto, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So this is also a misdemeanor in New York law, but it is another crime. So it thus becomes presumably the predicate crime for the business records falsification in the first degree. So Donald Trump, in an attempt to participate in a conspiracy to promote himself in the election, made these payments to Stormy Daniels. He falsified his business records, calling them legal fees, when in fact they were hush money payments to a whore. And thus, that is the predicate crime of the falsification of business records. So that is, as
far as we can tell, yeah.
So that is the justification. The thing is, he's never actually been convicted of section 17-152. He's not even charged with that crime.
Well, and even worse, the FEC actually looked at this and said, yeah, no, there's no improper campaign expenditures here.
Right. So you did get a little ahead of me. The FEC did an investigation of this, and they concluded that no charges were warranted. So Donald Trump didn't violate federal law, but somehow violated state law, which turned his falsifying of business records into a felony, which had a longer statute of limitations and thus opens him up for prosecution. So that is the theory under which he was prosecuted, despite the fact that this is a federal election campaign, not a New York State election campaign. And New York State law can't be predicated on as far as I can tell, can't be predicated on a federal election campaign. New York has no authority to govern how federal election campaigns are governed. That's what the FEC is for, correct?
Yeah, the FEC is the primary prosecutor of such crimes or civil violations, as most of them are. DOJ is then the other arm that can pursue criminal charges. The state AG has no, nor a city AG, they don't have the authority to prosecute that specific crime. So in order for it to be a predicate crime, it would have had to have been adjudicated beforehand. There's been no such adjudication. It's sort of akin to the reasoning in Colorado when the court said that Trump was ineligible to be on the ballot because of his crime of fomenting an insurrection on January 6th. Of course, he's not ever been charged with that, nor has he ever been found guilty of it. So they just assumed guilt and proceeded from there. And of course, Trump wasn't even a defendant. He wasn't even allowed to participate in that trial. This is different. He gets to participate, but Bragg never really told him what exactly this predicate crime, nor the jury, which is a violation of his Fifth and Sixth Amendments. His Fifth Amendment to due process and his Sixth Amendment to confront his accusers and to know the charges against him. That is unconscionable, anti-constitutional, unconstitutional, and just a pure violation of rights.
Well, they gave the jurors a choice, as I believe, of which of the three predicate crimes it might have been.
Just pick the smorgasbord, whatever you want.
And if four of you pick one crime, four of you pick a second crime, and four of you pick a third crime, it doesn't matter. It all comes out in the wash. That's
still 12.
Everybody agrees that there was a crime, so that's 12.
Right. Doesn't matter if you agree it was the same crime. And that's absolutely bullshit. That is not how the law works.
Well, it's certainly how the law works in New York State in this particular case. But
that's true.
I would like to point out something else that happened. And I happened to see it this week when I was looking over Twitter, and it's this right here, and it's a brief explanation of that's not good. Something went wrong. It's a brief explanation of what Hillary Clinton did in 2016 over the Steele dossier, because as we'll see shortly, Hillary Clinton as well as the DNC were actually fined in a what is basically a plea bargain agreement. We'll take a look at it in a minute. For reporting that legal fees that they paid to Perkins Coie, their lawyers, were not in fact legal fees. They were in fact payments to another agency, which we'll take a look at in a minute, to produce the Steele dossier for Trump. So since Hillary Clinton's campaign is based in Brooklyn, that would put her under the jurisdiction of the state of New York, theoretically, and we can use the exact same reasoning for Hillary Clinton, except the difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is, of course, that Hillary Clinton was fined. The party and campaign reported payments to the powerhouse Democratic law firms Perkins Coie Perkins Coie as legal expenses, when in actuality some of the money was earmarked for paying Fusion GPS through Perkins Coie to conduct opposition research. The DNC had to pay $113,000 or $105,000. Hillary Clinton, her campaign, had to pay $8,000. It is a conciliation agreement. That's the exact thing. That's the exact term that it's called. It found probable cause to believe that both the campaign and National Party misreported the purpose of certain disbursements when they said certain payments to Perkins Coie were for legal fees. They were not for legal fees. So Hillary Clinton, in fact, falsified business records from her campaign in Brooklyn to misrepresent payments to Perkins Coie to prevent Donald Trump from being elected president. As far as a legal theory goes, I don't see any difference between what Hillary Clinton did and what Donald Trump did, with the exception of the fact that the Federal Election Committee actually fined her for misrepresentation. In her case, they found that there was material representation, both by her and the Democratic National Committee, on these payments to Perkins Coie.
The biggest difference is that the payments that Hillary Clinton made to Perkins Coie were absolutely campaign expenditures. They were spent on opposition research, and they were disguised as payments to the law firm as legal fees, which they can write off. That is exactly what Alvin Bragg charged charged Donald Trump personally with. It's simply unconscionable that you pick and choose. And I mean, Alvin Bragg had to really come up with a novel legal theory in order to pursue these charges. You had it in spades right there. You didn't have to come up with anything novel. It was right there in black and white. You had the conviction by the FEC, a civil conviction, yes. But it was exactly what Alvin Bragg accused the Trump campaign of doing. But of course, faced no charges. Now, that would have been the Brooklyn DA, not Manhattan. New York County DA. But
still, the theory of the crime actually fits the Clinton situation better than it fits Donald Trump, because there is a predicate crime, at least, with the conciliation agreement that they came up with the FEC.
And even then, it still wasn't a crime. It was a civil violation, but it didn't violate an actual criminal statute, which makes it even more ridiculous in this case to charge Donald Trump with a crime for which he was never charged, nor tried, nor convicted.
But it worked.
Yeah, surprise.
They got their conviction. So I think, first of all, what are Donald Trump's primary arguments on appeal?
Right. I mean, there are several. One of the, I think, pretty easy ones, considering the recent appeal that Harvey Weinstein won in New York, was that what's the term they use? It's prejudicial testimony was offered and accepted by the court that should not have been allowed at all. It was salacious and had no probative value. It only served to say, hey, look, here's a bad guy. It's character evidence that had nothing to do with the actual issues at law. And that was overturned. You clearly had the same thing here with Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels' testimony was completely unnecessary. Even Judge Merchan was like, hey, you need to get a hold on this girl. It was completely prejudicial, had no probative value whatsoever about how the business records got submitted. So it was just salacious testimony to assassinate the character of the defendant. That's a big no-no, even in New York. I can also think of the fact that um, the judge would not allow uh, the defendant to put on its expert testimony to explain what the perceived and still as yet unknown predicate crime was.
Right.
With respect to
Trump had an election law expert that
right.
the judge refused to allow.
He was a former FEC chairman.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, definitely an expert in federal election law.
Right. So, and he refused to allow that. That's denying the defense the ability to put on its own defense. That's also a big no-no, even in New York. The jury instructions were absolutely an abomination. It's solid Supreme Court law that there has to be unanimous decision on what the crime is. You can't pull this smorgasbord thing and say, well, as long as you think he was trying to cover up some crime,
even if you don't agree on what the crime is.
Right. That's absolutely bullshit. You cannot do that. That is a clear violation of the U.S. Constitution. I expect it's even a clear violation of the New York Constitution, as well as Court of Appeals law. And the Court of Appeals is the highest law. New York's a little backwards. Supreme Court is its, trial court. And then you have, I think there might be an intermediate Court of Appeals for some things. And then you have the Court of Appeals, which is like the Supreme Court in what every other state calls it.
Or everywhere else in the United States.
Right. And they just absolutely bollocks that one up. I'm trying to think. There's so many things. I mean, you could be niggling about some of the objections raised by the defense that were just no. You could be. I mean, there's all kinds of little things in there, but I think the main things are the fact that prejudicial testimony, that alone was enough to get the Harvey Weinstein conviction overturned. You have that here in spades. The fact that there was no evidence whatsoever presented towards a predicate crime, none. How can the jury possibly find that he was guilty if there is no evidence presented? That doesn't make any sense at all. It's a shadow crime that he's being convicted of, for which there was no testimony or evidence offered. So right there, that should just have been a directed verdict. The jury has no evidence upon which to find that this could have been what it was. So right there, it throws out the felony charge, and then the misdemeanors go away for lack of being beyond the statute of limitations.
So the real question is, will that happen? Because
it is a real question, because I don't trust the bastards up in Albany any more than the assholes down in Manhattan.
I mean, despite
they're all
what
the
they
same
did
sort.
for Harvey Weinstein.
Right. Well, at least he has a D after his name.
Yeah, but Harvey Weinstein, of course, was not really a political case per se, the way that this explicitly is.
Yeah, this is very explicitly a political case. Yes, it was political in the terms of the current climate of social justice, and let's face it, Harvey Weinstein, it's a real slime ball. But he has rights as well. Every defendant that goes before the court has rights. And matter of fact, we slant. This is the British and American system, the Anglosphere system, that we heavily favor the defense against the state, and that's a good thing. We should be prejudiced against the state. They need to clearly, beyond all reasonable doubt, and upon unanimous decision of a jury of peers, make their case. That none of that happened here.
The next question is time, because I don't know that the New York judicial system will care to take much notice of when the election occurs.
Right. They
So
won't.
they might not even hear this until, well, they probably won't hear this until the next term, and probably won't issue.
I wouldn't be surprised if it takes until 2026 to get this on the calendar.
And they can't go straight to the Supreme Court because this is a state conviction. You have to exhaust your state remedies first,
There
right?
are so okay. There actually are means to go directly to the Supreme Court. Slim to none chance, but this might be one of those exceptions. It's called it's some sort of writ that you can appeal to the Supreme Court to issue, which basically takes up the federal issues. And there are federal issues here when you're talking about the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, um, and the First Amendment with the gag orders and stuff. So potentially, yes, it could go directly to the Supreme Court. Very slim chance. And one of the reasons that the Supreme Court is getting so politicized now with all these things about, what flags Alito has and, how awful Thomas is and his wife. They're going to be very shy, I think, about taking such a politically charged case, to which it's fairly obvious how this would come down if everybody's being reasonable and straightforward. I expect that Trump's legal team may try to do that, especially if they get pushed off by the Court of Appeals. But they may be forced to go to a district court first, which would be the Southern District of New York. I don't know how well they're going to do there. And then to the Second Circuit. Again, I don't know how well they're going to do there. And that will take plenty of time, at least a year, maybe a year and a half. And of course, they'll request expedited hearings. Maybe they'll be granted, maybe they won't. I don't know.
Yeah, good luck with it.
I think the only thing that's clear is that none of this is going to be resolved before November 5th.
Which means that the Democrats, no matter what happens with the appeal, even if we assume that ultimately this conviction gets overturned because of the many infirmities in the trial case, which you've discussed, it doesn't matter because the Democrats now get to walk into the election in 2020 talking about Donald Trump being a convicted felon.
Yeah. How'd that work against Marion Barry?
Yes, who actually was caught on tape smoking crack.
That bitch set me up.
Yeah, so I guess the next question is, technically, Donald Trump could be sentenced to jail for this. It is a Class E felony.
And that is, so it's interesting that Merchan put the sentencing hearing off to July 11th, which is exactly 2 days before the Republican National Convention. I think they're itching to throw him in jail. According to Sunny Hostin, who says she has insider info, I would take that with a huge box of salt. They're going to ask for a year. And they want to send him to Rikers. For those who don't know, and I expect anybody who's ever watched Law and Order knows where Rikers is and what it is. It's sort of an intermediate jail. It's not prison. It's a jail. So it's where people who are in custody pending a hearing,
pretrial confinement,
or have been convicted of a misdemeanor. So that means it's less than a year of time that they have to serve. That's where they would go. It's not pretty. And I just can't even imagine the complications of how Secret Service is going to deal with that. And but I think the Democrats are all in. They're going to push it. They're going to try to make that happen. Now, of course, that decision can also be appealed. And maybe that puts it beyond the election. I don't know.
CBS did a poll after the conviction and basically found that it didn't change anybody's mind. And here are the overall numbers. 56% of people said he had a fair trial. 44% said it was an unfair trial.
Was it who they asked?
If you break that down by party, however, you get a little bit of a different. Independents are split kind of down the middle. 96% of Democrats said this was completely fair. 86% of Republicans said it was completely unfair.
And how many of those 14% of Republicans are never Trumpers?
Yeah.
Thus, not really Republicans.
Yeah, I don't.
Do we have any demographics on this at all?
No, just basically by party.
Do we even know how many people they asked?
We do know how many people they ask. It was reported up here, but I'd have to find it in the text, and I'm not gonna.
Right.
Did the jury reach the right decision? Again, 57 to 43%, but similarly, 96 to 82% on the party split. I want to talk about this party split because I think that's super important. Is Trump fit to be president now that he's convicted? 51% say no. 40% say yes. And there's just some other, feeling questions as well for this. But the thing that really concerns me about this are these numbers here, this split between Democrats and Republicans.
Well, it's the independents that worries me more.
Yeah, because they can't, well, look, the independents are at least split more or less down the middle. I think the split between Democrats and Republicans is really concerning because if we can't even
in the long term, yes.
If we can't even agree on whether the criminal justice system is working the way that it's supposed to work, then I don't know what we're going to be able to agree on.
Well, we've been saying this for literally decades. This is the way things were headed. That we have run out of commonalities where we can find compromise. It's either you do what we want or you do what you want, and those things are diametrically opposed. We cannot do both.
Well, here's something that should concern everybody. This story in The Guardian. I'm not going to read any of the excerpts, although I have one highlighted. But since I can't even read from a federal court opinion without getting a strike, I'm certainly not going to be able to read this without a strike. But this is one of the posts that they quoted. And this, I think, is more concerning than anything. We now have and I'm sure it's a minority, but I expect it's a relatively significant minority of the population.
I'm fearing that it's growing.
Who now believes that what we've been calling the great national divorce is inevitable at this point. And whether it can be done peacefully or not, I think is now an open question.
I unfortunately agree.
And Donald Trump pulled off, it was $34.8 million in small dollar donations. It was actually about $53 million overall in the single day after his conviction. So there are people there who have this feeling about what's going on. And I don't know how you maintain a civil society with that level of distrust of the justice system. And by the way, we wouldn't have that level of distrust of the justice system if it appeared to operate fairly. And that's the problem. If you've lost a basic trust in a basic non-political institution, like a fair and impartial system of justice, which, look, I'm not going to say that we've ever had. If you're a poor person in this country and you get accused of a crime, you are screwed.
Yeah.
Because in most states, you're going to get an overworked public defender who is not going to put on the best defense for you. There are a couple of states which I actually I can see some good parts of this system. I think Alabama or Mississippi is one of the states where every criminal defense attorney is required by law to take public defense assignments.
Virginia's the same way. A lot of the Commonwealth states are.
And so instead of being a public defender, like in New York, they have public defenders. They're hired, they're paid for by the city.
And most states have both. So it's not only you have the public defender's office, but you can be charged by a judge to handle a criminal defense, and you get paid, not much, but you do get paid, at least in Virginia. I don't know how it works everywhere. But yeah, you can be told by a judge, guess what? You're now that guy's lawyer.
Okay, well, that's probably a better system than just a public defender, because public defenders tend to be hugely overworked. But look, everybody.
Although they are really, really competent, they're actually much more competent than you realize.
Yeah, but that competence has to be stretched out across a lot.
Well, that's the problem, is they have so many cases that, and then they're dealing with recalcitrant clients who may not show up for hearings, who don't give them information, who do not make themselves available,
who lie to them.
Right. Yeah. The population that they're dealing with is not the easiest population to control or help. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for those defenders. And that goes whether you're a public defender or a private defense attorney.
Yeah. But I think generally everybody agrees that that you get the justice that you can pay for.
I think that's absolutely true. I absolutely 100% believe that. How'd that work out for Trump, though?
Yeah, well, that is one of the troubles with the money argument. If money, it's like money in elections. We all remember how President Forbes and President Perot fundamentally changed how the U.S. government worked, right?
President Bloomberg and
yeah, money isn't the do all, be all, end all, but it certainly helps.
It's not a panacea. But even when Trump got elected in 2016, he was massively outspent, massively outraised. But it didn't matter because they spent the money wisely, whereas the Clinton campaign did not. They avoided some of the pitfalls. The GOP avoided some of the pitfalls of, trying to spend a ton of money in California and New York or Vermont or, places where they knew they really didn't have a chance. Why waste the resources?
Right.
And then they didn't really spend a whole lot to bother defending up, places like Texas and Oklahoma that, every election, there's a red stripe that goes from Texas all the way up to Canada. And those are just red states. If you don't waste your resources there, you still go visit, you do spend some resources there, but you don't have to put a whole lot in there. You put it into the battleground states, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. Hey, Hillary, Wisconsin, it's a state.
Yeah, it reminds me of Hillary Clinton having a rally on Sunday in Philadelphia before the election because she had ignored Pennsylvania for the whole election, and all of a sudden, oh, wait a second, we may not be doing too good there.
Yeah, huh.
But this, to me, and I think anybody who watches this knows that neither one of us are huge fans of Trump.
Yeah, he's a buffoon.
But this verdict to me meant, and I hate to sound overly dramatic about it, but I don't live in the same country I was born in. The country that
I absolutely agree.
The country that we knew, the country that we thought we had, is gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Ever since Reagan left office, things changed. Tactics changed.
I think that change is a lot more recent. I really think that is a 21st century change, not a,
It is certainly since the 2000 election,
yeah, the 2000 election. Because
the lawfare got way upped.
remember,
That's true.
because even as late as Bill Clinton, there are not too many Democratic presidents that in the State of a Union declared the era of big government is over.
Yeah, that's right. Lying piece of shit.
This is a different country now, and it seems to me that because all of the institutions have been captured by the left, they're perfectly comfortable engaging in literal rather than psychological projection.
Absolutely.
Because this is a case of literal projection.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary Clinton did the exact same thing. It's not a crime. But Donald Trump, when he does it, it's a crime. And this two-tier justice system, which, by the way, we've been talking about for a while now. It's been fairly obvious since 2016. Andrew McCabe, he lied to the FBI. Is he in jail? No. He gets to retire, and he gets to keep his pension.
Yeah, he was fired before he would have received his pension. Appealed that, and they said, no, you get your pension, but you're still fired. It's like, what?
Yeah.
He gets the best of both worlds? Jesus.
So he admits to lying to the FBI in an official investigation, which would send you or me to jail.
Right.
And all it did is give him an extra 2 weeks, literally an extra 2 weeks of vacation.
Well, just look at the the documents cases against Biden and Trump. You couldn't come up with a better comparison. Trump was a president. Biden was not.
Yeah, Biden had secret documents, classified documents. We don't know what level of classification, but classified documents from his time as a senator, which means he
had no right to have.
Yeah, he would have had to have stolen those documents.
Exactly. He would have had to pull them out of a skiff. I mean, in his socks like Sandy Berger, was it Sandy Berger? Yeah. And let's see, one of them had classification or declassification authority. The other one did not. One of them had Secret Service protection and guarded the boxes of documents. The other one had them in the garage. Oh, and at another place. Oh, and another place. Oh, and another place. I mean, the differences are astounding, and yet somehow Trump is criminally liable, so much so they had to raid his house. Oh, that was another thing. They warned Biden before they went and searched his house, and he still couldn't figure out to get the shit out of the garage.
Yes, well, as the special prosecutor said, he's too old and senile to be prosecuted.
And that's another thing. Now they're hiding the audio tape, and I bet there's videotape. That'd be more interesting. They admit that they finally admitted, thanks to Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch, that they altered the transcript in places. We took out the double I and where it was unintelligible. We just tried to clean it up a little bit, and I'm sure that's all you did. I'm sure you didn't hide any of the instances that caused Robert Hur to find that, yeah, he's definitely guilty, but people are just going to think he's a doddering old man with a bad memory. We really couldn't. I don't think we could actually convict him. So, scot-free.
And he gets to walk, but he certainly doesn't want us to hear those audio tapes.
Right. And they're coming up with these are non-legal arguments.
Oh, yeah.
These are political arguments.
They're claiming executive privilege over this stuff when this is not This is not covered under executive privilege.
No,
or at least
not.
It never has been before. This has nothing to do with the
It's
president's
an investigation.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the president's ability to talk frankly with his advisors on policy and national security issues, which we would want to have covered by executive privilege, because I'm sure that in those discussions, a lot of relatively unwise ideas are bandied about. I'm sure everybody's pretty sure of that.
And that's okay.
And that's fine. You know, all sorts of weird hypotheticals are fine, even if they wouldn't look good on the front page of the New York Times. Right. But this was a criminal investigation by a special prosecutor.
It was an adversarial process.
Yeah, there's no executive privilege that covers that.
And now what they're trying to say is, oh, well, there's AI deep fake privilege. Because they might a malicious person might take these tapes or video and create deep fakes that would damage the presidency.
Yes, because you could never fake audio prior to 2022, right?
This is absolutely. There's no that's not a legal argument. That makes absolutely no sense. They could take what they already have. He gives press conferences.
Yeah,
sometimes
someone might alter it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's not an argument. That's just a thing that might happen after it's publicly released. So, you know, what does that matter? Now, will these arguments prevail in court? We don't know. But on their face, they're illegitimate arguments. But that's fine. You
don't need to have a legal training to understand how stupid these arguments are, right? I mean, it's so obviously, CYA.
Yeah, I mean, there are things in the law that don't make sense to the average person. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of weird things, qualified immunity being one of them, for example. Why that exists doesn't make any sense.
Civil procedure, criminal procedure. Not everybody's going to know all that stuff. And that's fine. But this is a substantive argument that's supposed to be based in law. I mean, that makes no sense at all. Yeah, imagine if Nixon had said, well, I'm not turning over the tapes because somebody might fake what I actually said there.
But look, at least Robert Hur is a special prosecutor, which means for better or for worse, he gets to make decisions about who gets prosecuted and who gets let go.
But he has to report to Congress.
Yes, well, we'll see how that works out. But the reason I say that is because in the Hillary Clinton email thing, that decision not to prosecute wasn't made by the Justice Department. It wasn't made by a prosecutor or an AUSA or a special counsel. It was made by James Comey, determining whether someone can be prosecuted or should be prosecuted, and the likelihood
she didn't have
of
the requisite intent.
Yeah, assuming those are prosecutorial decisions that the FBI doesn't get to make.
That's right. They are not in any position to do that.
They are a reporting agency. They investigate and report. And their report is used as a basis generally by an assistant U.S. attorney for determining whether someone should be prosecuted or not. But
they do make recommendations on go, no go. But that is not the end of the line. The end of the line is the Attorney General, who at the time was Anita Dunn. I can't remember who it was. I just remember that she had the tarmac talk with Bill Clinton.
With Bill Clinton in an airplane where they talked about their grandchildren. You understand?
Their grandkids, right? And where are you summering this year?
Yeah, exactly. But she didn't have to weigh in because James Comey took all the heat for it and said, yeah, this couldn't be prosecuted. And everyone
she deferred her decision to him.
Yeah, and everyone just accepted that, like, that's the way this is supposed to work. Like the FBI, a police agency, gets to decide who prosecutes. That's not the system we built in this country. Police agencies don't get to decide crap. I mean, they can decide who to arrest. They can decide what probable cause exists for an arrest. But after that, They send a big file over to the DA or the AUSA, depending on what level it is, and those decisions are made there. But Hillary Clinton got a special, consideration, or what appears to be a special consideration in that case. So this two-tier justice system appears to have really been weaponized as a result of, as a result of Trump's election.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because prior to that, I can't think of any cases where there was this amount of blatant disparity in the treatment. And the thing that really shocks me is watching people, online and other places talk about this, and they elide right past it as if it's completely unimportant or it's completely unrelated. That thing that I showed you on Twitter from David Sachs, where he just kind of lays out what happened with Hillary Clinton, the pushback that he's gotten from people on the left. Oh, these two situations were nothing alike. It is so completely different. How? I mean, you can't just assert that it's different, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're just asserting that it's different, and if you don't like it, you can go screw. And I guess they expect everybody to just knuckle under to that and assume that, okay, well, that's fine. And look, people are willing to knuckle under for a variety of reasons. There was, you know who Jesse Kelly is, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of a right-wing.
He's a radio talk show host. He's definitely a bomb thrower, but he's also, I wouldn't call him a GOP rah, rah, rah guy. He's more of a conservative rah, rah, rah guy.
Yeah, well, he said something, and I thought I had it up, and I appear to have lost it. But I'm pretty sure I can find it pretty quick. Where right after Trump's conviction, he basically said, don't do anything dumb. And I just got to scroll here a little bit. I think I'm close. Oh gosh. Now I can't find it. What he basically said is, the feds are out there watching right now to see if you do something illegal. So whatever you do,
they're looking for backlash. That's right.
So whatever you do, stay legal. Also,
they're trying to find
and also
depend on Trump.
And also, FYI, there is a Fed in your internet chat group, just so that you know. And you know what? I did reply to that, so I bet I can find it super easy if I just go to my replies. I can, in fact, find it super easy if I go to my replies. So what he said, the feds are dying for you to do something illegal today so they can kill you or throw you in prison. So don't. Legal. Stay legal. Mad is fine. You should be mad, but stay legal. P.S. There's a Fed in that chat group you're on now. Which, fine, it's great advice. I understand it. But as I replied, sure, stay legal. Of course, they get to decide what legal means. Yep. So good luck with that. And if you have a justice system where, as I feel, basically anything that you do can be prosecuted. And look, we're not as bad as Britain yet. I think in the UK last year, they arrested something like 3,000 people for things that they said on the internet.
Right. Scotland, Ireland,
yeah,
France, Germany.
Yeah, we're not there
France
yet.
France actually isn't quite as bad.
We're not there yet, but
we're getting fucking close. The thing is that we at least have the First Amendment to protect us. Nobody else in the world has that. Nobody.
Yeah, it doesn't protect us from YouTube or Google, or Facebook, but it technically protects us from the U.S. government.
Right.
And in fact, I believe the federal courts this last week just had a case where they just basically, it was New York against the NRA.
That's right. Where Sotomayor actually wrote the decision, a unanimous 9-0 decision that Sotomayor drafted and just excoriated I can't remember what the name of the agency is or the name of the lady who led it for basically trying to do a runaround attack on the NRA by threatening those who insured the NRA, those who banked the NRA, anybody that did any business with the NRA. Said, well, that's a mighty fine license you got there. It'd be really bad if you kept doing business with the NRA and we had to pull it.
Exactly.
Just saying.
So 9-0 decision on the Supreme Court saying
and based on the First Amendment,
agencies cannot coerce private entities into actions.
Even California has found that. The California Supreme Court held that. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was something about the alternative to, like, the pregnancy crisis centers had to offer abortion, not services, but tell them where they could go get an abortion and give them referrals. And even the California Supreme Court said, no, that's compelled speech. You can't compel speech. So this is a pretty robust law, regardless of how blue your state or city is. Well, at least it should be.
Yeah, it should be, but I bet there are certain things that if you said, you would get the FBI knocking on your door.
Well, and what's interesting is what's typical of leftist lawfare is they're not concerned about the ultimate conviction. They're concerned about the first conviction, just to get it on the books. And the same is going on with Trump here. So now they can say he's a convicted felon.
The process,
they know damn well.
The process is the punishment.
That's absolutely true. And we've talked about that lots of times. But it's also being able to label someone as a convicted felon, to smear them, even though they know, or at least have a reasonable likelihood of, they have a reasonable suspicion that the likelihood of this ultimately prevailing is really not good. It's going to be overturned on appeal. Between the time you get the conviction and the time you finally win the appeal, there's plenty of space time there to just hammer and hammer and hammer away.
Yeah, and that is what Trump is facing right now. But look, Michael, I'm gonna do something a little weird. It's gonna seem a little weird. I'm gonna end the podcast now, and I'll tell you why I'm ending the podcast now. When I created the live stream for this, somehow I listed the live stream as unlisted, which means that no one, literally no one, has watched this podcast. And we've been on.
Did you figure that out from the fact that there were no comments?
Well, I've been looking. There was no one waiting. There was no comments. There was nothing happening here. Nobody said anything. And then I happened to look over here on my YouTube thing, and it says title, Observations for June 2nd, June 2024, category People and Blogs, Privacy, Unlisted. So no one can actually see the podcast live. So since that is so, I think...
Can they see it recorded?
They will be able to see it recorded, because I will be able to change it.
It's not a complete waste of time.
It is not a complete waste of time. There is a podcast. It exists, but people will only see the recorded version, not the live version. So I was wondering...
I'm good with that.
I was wondering why there were no viewers, there was no chat rate, there were no views. I'm like, did everybody just forget about us today? Nope, they didn't. I'm an idiot. So with my idiocy being on display there, let's just cut it off. I'm good with that. I'll put up the recording. We'll take a little break. It's been an hour anyway, so we got a good hour out of it. So I think with that, we're done.
I think we covered the most salient points.
All right. So have a great week, Michael. We'll talk to you later.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
And for everyone else watching on YouTube, in the recorded version, because that's the only people who will ever watch this, have a great week too. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, so long.